guys, welcome back to my channel. I'm so glad you stopped by today because today we are going to be making a Bengal tiger dragon. If you guys remember a while back, I did a tutorial on how to sew in markings on your fur fabric, and one of them was the tiger pattern. I also did spots and then how to blend in different colors. I'll leave a link down below if you guys didn't see it. But back when I did that tutorial, I wasn't quite sure if I was going to use any of them for creatures, but I really like the tiger markings, so I ended up making this dragon with that. Anyways, let's get started. Okay guys, so the first thing that we're going to work on to make our dragon is getting all the clay pieces done. So I have quite a bit that I need to do, but we're going to start on the antlers first. So the antlers, they're going to need a wire frame. So basically the first thing that I did was I kind of sketched out a rough idea of what I wanted my antlers to look like. Now with these, they're going to be a little bit different because I actually want to connect them in a kind of more fantasy type way. They're not going to be like really natural looking antlers. I just wanted to try something a little bit weird with them. So I drew that out, I made a wire frame, and then I started adding clay to the wire frame. When it comes to adding the clay to the wire frame, it's easier to start with the points I've found out and then bake all of those once you have them in place. And then once you have all the points in place and you've baked them, you can then move on to more of the body of the antler. So basically covering up the rest of the wire frame. So adding the clay to the wire frame for the antlers is pretty simple. First thing that I'm going to do is I'm just going to roll out some strips of clay, roughly about the thickness that I want the antlers to be in that specific spot that I'm going to cover. Then I'm just going to take that, and with the points, I just push them on, but with the body of the antlers, I'm going to wrap it around the wire. So I'll get that in place, kind of mess around with the shape of it, and then start blending it together and smoothing it out. Now I actually did try something a little bit different with this pair of antlers. In between adding clay and baking it, I decided to sand everything down. So I've actually baked these multiple times, just kind of 20 minutes at 275 Fahrenheit, let it cool, and then I would sand everything to kind of get an extra smooth surface. I found it actually really helped with making the antlers nice and smooth, because there's only so much you can do with your fingers and trying to smooth everything out that way. So again, I did do a lot of pre-bakes with this that were roughly about 20 minutes, but once I was completely finished with the antlers, I put them in for about 45 minutes at our 275 Fahrenheit temperature. Moving on to the clay head, I'm going to be working with a glass container. This is just an upside down tea light holder, so basically something that was used to hold candles. I cleaned it out and I've been using the bottom of it. It works really well for heads roughly this size. And then for the head, I'm just going to take a lump of tinfoil, make it into a nice compacted cone, and I'm going to glue it into place. So once I have that in place, I'm going to take some strips of clay and I'm going to start wrapping it around my tinfoil cone, and then I'm going to blend everything together. Once it's blended together, I can adjust the shape and get a basic idea of what the shape of the head should be. Once I have a basic shape for my head, I'm then going to take the antlers that we made and I'm going to make a nice indent at the top of the head where we're going to connect them later. I'm not going to connect them now because it's going to be kind of harder to work with. They're actually going to be added almost at the very end. So I'm going to make that indent, I'm going to adjust everything, kind of clean it up, and then we can start adding our facial features. The first thing that I decided to do was I decided that I wanted to make the cheeks, kind of the jawbone area, a little bit wider, so I added some lumps of clay there, and then I smoothed and blended it into the rest of the face. And then I'm going to start adding the glass eyes. So I picked these glass eyes out because I figured the green would look really cool with the color of the tiger. So I'm going to take small balls of clay first, and I'm going to lay them out where I want my glass eyes to go. I'm then going to take those glass eyes and I'm going to push them on top of those balls of clay. I'm going to make sure they're positioned correctly, and since we do have more of a cat eye shape, I'm going to make sure that they're level as well. That way you don't have a pupil that is horizontal and the other one is vertical. So I'm going to get those in place, and then I'm going to take some smaller strips of clay and start building up the bottom eyelid and then the upper eyelid. I'm going to lay those out, and then I'm going to start blending them into the rest of the face and cleaning up the edges going around the eye. When doing the upper eyelids, I decided to add some balls of clay just to kind of bring out his forehead and kind of add a little bit more shape to it. After that, I'm going to move on to making the shape of the mouth. So I want to add a little bit more clay at the very front of his snout to make it look like he has cheeks. I'm going to blend that in, and then I'm going to use my tools to kind of sketch out the shape of the mouth. I'm going to make sure that's even on both sides, and then I'm going to use my tools to clean up those lines. Next, I'm going to start working on the nose. So I'm going to put a tiny line right in the middle to know where the middle of the nose is, and then I'm going to use a dotting tool to make the nostrils. After that, I'm going to use a couple other tools to adjust the shape of the nostrils, and then I'm going to start framing the bottom portion of the nose. Mainly doing this so it kind of separates from the rest of the face just a little bit. Now, most of the time when I make ears, I make them out of felt so that they're soft and plush, but these are going to be kind of flat against the head, so I'm going to be sculpting them out of clay. So I'm going to take 2 even amounts of clay, I'm going to make them kind of cone-shaped, and then I'm going to place them on the head where I want the ears. I'm going to blend them in and adjust the shape. I'm also going to use my tools to kind of dig in and make an opening for the ear. After that, I'm going to take one of my more sharper tools and I'm going to start adding a fur texture around the main features. So mainly going around the eyes and different things like that. So I'm going to double check that I like everything. I'm going to make sure the antlers still fit in the hole that we made for them. And then I'm going to put the dragon head in the oven for about 45 minutes at 275 Fahrenheit. Moving on to making the clay legs, these are also going to need a wireframe similar to how we made the antlers. So I did that ahead of time because I had 4 of them and it was just kind of time consuming, but basically they're all going to be the same type of wireframe. The back ones are just going to be bent just a little bit differently. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to take a ball of clay and we're going to cover up where all the wires are combined, and then they also separate into the toes. I'm going to start by adding clay to the bottoms of the toes and the backs of the legs. So I'm just going to take some strips of clay to the length and size that I want for the toes and the back of the leg, and I'm going to lay them onto the wireframe. Once everything is laid on, I'm going to start blending everything together and cleaning it up. Now these feet are kind of different from what I normally make. Normally I make quite large, bulky feet, but I wanted something a little bit more delicate for this dragon, so I went pretty small for this size of dragon. And then since the style of the dragon is more of a furry type style, I'm going to add a fur texture to the back of the leg. So I'm just going to take a tool and I'm going to add some lines and just kind of feather everything out to make it look like it's a little bit fluffy and furry. So I'm going to do this to all 4 of the legs, and then I'm going to pre-bake them for another 20 minutes, same temperature. And then once those are out of the oven again and are nice and cool to touch, we can then start adding clay to the tops of the feet and finishing them up. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to add some clay to the very top of the foot. And the main reason for this is I didn't want the foot to be too flat. I wanted to add a little bit more shape to it. So I covered that up with a ball of clay and I blended that into the rest of the clay on the foot. And then after that, we're going to start covering up the tops of our toes. Now, I want some scales, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a bunch of really tiny clay balls. They're going to be all roughly about the same size, and I'm going to layer them going up the toe. So I'm going to do that to all 4 of the toes, and then I'm going to make some larger balls of clay for the front of the leg. And I'm going to do the same thing, just layering them as I go up the leg. So once I have all 4 of the feet completely done, we're going to put them in for one final bake. This one's going to be about 45 minutes at our 275 Fahrenheit temperature. And then once everything is completely done baking, cooled to touch, we can then start painting. Now surprisingly, a lot of the painting for this piece was pretty simple. So for the antlers, I want them to be a gold, so I'm going to start by primering them kind of a light brown color. I'm going to let that dry, and then I'm going to use this one gold paint that I have, and I'm going to go over the entire antler. So that's literally all the painting that I'm going to do for the antlers. I am going to add stuff later to them when we put everything together though. And then for the face, I'm going to be primering and painting the bottom portion of the face a white, and the top is going to be a orange. So I did the white first, I let that dry, I did the orange, and then I kind of adjusted and blended everything together by using the white again a little bit over the orange. And then that same brown that we used to primer our antlers, I'm going to use to paint the nose and the inside of the ears. I'm going to let that dry also, and then I'm going to go over the nose again with a black because I ended up not wanting a pink nose and I just decided to change it up. And then I'm going to paint around the eyes with the black as well. So after that, I added a little bit of a highlight here and there. I really didn't do much more because again, we are going to be furring this face later. So most of this isn't going to be really shown. It's just you want it to match the fur that you're adding so you don't have white clay peeking through the fur that you're adding. So it's just easier to paint and then fur. So again, the painting for this was pretty basic. The last thing that I needed to do was, once the paint was completely dried, was to peel off the paint that got on the glass eyes. And then for the feet, we're going to be using the same colors that we painted the face. With this, the inside portion of the leg, so I will kind of have to make sure that I don't mix these up, but the inside portion I'm going to be painting white, and then the outside portion I'm going to be painting the orange. And then I'm also going to blend these two together as well, so it's not just an immediate white to orange transition, there's a little bit of a blend. So I did that, I let that dry as well, and then I moved on to the scales on the front of the feet. I decided that I wanted these to be done the same way we did the antlers, so I'm going to primer them with that brown, and then I'm going to go over them with the gold paint. So of course I got to do this to all four of the feet, and then once I have all my painting done, I'm going to mix up some resin and just paint over everything and kind of lock it in with the resin. So this is just kind of like a varnish, but it's a little thicker and more durable. Okay, now we can start on the sewing. So the pattern for this I left extremely simple because I needed to sew all the stripes into it. So like I said at the beginning of this video, this was originally part of another tutorial where I showed how to sew in fur markings. So all the stripes and stuff were sewn ahead of time. I've got a tutorial. I'll leave a link down below if you guys want to see how I did that. But this is just the basic shape of the body minus sewing in all the stripes. In that video, I did 3 different patterns. One of them was the tiger stripes. I did the main body in that video, and then off camera, I did the neck and the tail. So now that I have these pieces, we're going to connect all 3 of these together into one long strip. And then the legs are pretty simple as well. I've got a pattern for the front legs and the back legs, and then each one has an inside portion, which is white, and an outside portion, which is orange. And the only sewing we're going to do right now with them is we're going to be sewing the fronts of them together. So we're going to take an inside portion and an outside portion and sew down the front only, connecting the 2 pieces together. Once that's done, we can start putting our dragon together. So I have all the clay pieces and all the sewing ready, and we're going to put it on a wire frame. So what we're going to do is we're going to add everything to a wire frame. I made the wire frame ahead of time. It's pretty simple. And what we're going to do is we're going to start with the fabric for the body, and we're going to figure out where the wires for the legs need to go. We're going to cut some tiny little holes for that, and we're going to slide our fabric over our wire frame. And then we're going to take our clay head and we're going to glue this to the wire for the neck. So we're just going to glue that right at the end, and then once that's dried, we can take the fabric for the neck and start gluing it around the base of the head. After that's dried, we can then start closing up the body. So I'm going to start at the base of the neck, and I'm going to start sewing down that until I get to the tip of the tail. While I'm doing this, I'm also stuffing as I go, that way it makes it easier to stuff. Once we have the body put together, we can then start adding the legs. So I'm going to take the fabric for the legs, and we're going to be sewing this onto the sides of the body. So the white under portion is going to go under the wire for the leg, and then the orange outer portion is going to be sewn over the wire. That way you have the wire inside of the leg. So we're going to sew those in place for the front and back legs, and this is where I decided that I needed to change things up a little bit because I realized the legs were going to be too short. So I ended up adding a little bit more fabric at the very end. So I kind of had to do the same. I took some white and orange and I just extended the legs so they were long enough. But once I fix that, I'm then going to take the clay legs and we're going to add these to the wire frame. So I'm just going to take the wires that are sticking out of the legs and I'm going to connect them to the wire frame. So I'm just going to take a thinner gauge wire and wrap all of these wires together and make sure they're nice and secure. And then I can take the fabric for the legs and I can glue them around the bases of the clay legs. You'll want to let that dry a little bit and then you can stuff the back of your legs and close them up. And of course you're going to have to do that to all 4 of the legs, but once you have the legs done, we're then going to shorten all that fur. So the main body was shaved ahead of time, so we're going to end up matching that with a trimmer and just kind of shave up that fur fabric for the legs. Okay, so we're at the point of adding the final touches. So we're going to add the antlers, some decoration, and probably some more stripes. So I have this kind of weird decorative stuff that actually came from a flower arrangement, and I'm going to be using this to decorate around the antlers. So while I'm gluing the antlers in place, I'm also going to be gluing some of this in place as well. Now for this, I'm only using a little bit of glue to hold everything in place temporarily, and then I'm going to fill in that hole, the rest of the hole, with resin. That way those antlers aren't going anywhere. Now, of course, since I'm using resin, I had to let that cure before I did anything else, but once it was done curing, I'm going to move on to furring the face. So I'm going to start with the under portion of the face, which is white. I have some larger strips of fur fabric that I've cut to fit, and I'm going to glue those first, and then I'm going to clean up the edges by adding fur trimming around that. I'm also adding some orange fur fabric around the antler base, that way we can hide all the seams and stuff. So once I finish furring the white portion of the face, I'm going to move on to the orange top portion of the face. I'm going to have to let everything dry once we're done with it, and then I want to add some more stripes because we don't have any stripes on the face or the legs. So for this, I'm going to be using my fabric markers. So I'm just going to be using the black one, and I'm going to draw in all the stripes that I want on the face, and I'm going to do the same thing to the legs just to add a little bit more detail there. Now if you do this, make sure you're using fabric markers that are meant to be washed and stuff like that, because if you use a Sharpie and you happen to accidentally get your piece damp or something, they will bleed and they will mess up and you won't be able to clean it up. So you want to make sure you're using the correct markers to do this. And then the last thing that I wanted to do was I wanted to add a little bit more decoration to the antlers, so I just glued some little gems into place at the little creases where the antlers divided. Okay guys, and this is the Bengal tiger dragon that I made. I had so much fun with it. Came out really good in my opinion. I had a lot of fun with this one. I'm going to have this dragon in my Etsy shop, so if anyone wants to buy him and give him a new home, make sure to check the links down below for that. I also have links to all the supplies that I tend to use to make my art dolls in the description as well. Now these links are affiliated links, so if you guys buy anything through them, it does help support the channel. Anyways guys, thank you so much for watching. Make sure to like, subscribe, do all that fun stuff, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.